U.S. presidents and UFOs have a long history together, over 200 years worth, and one of the biggest oversights around UFOs is forgetting powerful people benefit from a parallel information track to one the rest of us are sliding down, and that includes the occupants at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which might help put into context some of the pressure that is building today. I asked Lue Elizondo about presidents and UFOs, and he said nearly every president has been briefed about these various phenomena to varying degrees. And it goes all the way back to the beginning. One of the most famous stories about presidents and the paranormal involves future first President George Washington, who is alleged to have had a vision before the Battle of Valley Forge. But before we go any further, this story, well, it's false. Including the linking legends involving a Civil War Union general and his vision from George Washington. Both were fictional interpretations of imagined events used to help boost morale and tell political tales. And that's important because there is a lot of fiction to pull from the facts if any progress is going to be made around this issue. Skipping George Washington, we'll get to then Vice President Thomas Jefferson in 1801, who received a letter from a friend called William Dunbar, and he lived in Louisiana. And this letter? Well, it was about a UFO sighting and a crash. Dunbar alleges that he and others saw something in the sky on April 5, 1800 in Baton Rouge. He says it was about the size of a house, 70 or 80 feet long, and he references a diagram that was attached, but that diagram has since been lost. Dunbar describes it as a crimson ball of light moving across the sky just a few hundred feet off the ground, like a ball of light, akin to the sun giving off heat as it moved over people's heads, but it made no noise. It then accelerated, only to apparently crash into a nearby forest. Dunbar goes on to say in the letter that a considerable portion of the surface of the earth was found broken up, and every vegetable body burned or greatly scorched. Dunbar doesn't mention if any debris was found. You might suspect they saw a comet, as they were not officially recognized as falling space rocks, at least by Western astronomers, until about 1807. But the damage caused, if it was a meteoroid, would have been catastrophic based on its size, and it doesn't account for the changing speeds. Dunbar sent the letter in his capacity as president of the American Philosophical Society. That was a pseudoscientific organization founded by one of the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin. And some years later, Jefferson got another letter. In 1813, a man called Edward Hansford, innkeeper of the Washington Tavern in Portsmouth, Virginia, and another man, John Clark from Baltimore, sent a letter. They described seeing a ball of fire as bright as the sun emitting smoke as it moved across the sky, moving downwards only to seemingly change shape. It then moved straight up and changed shapes again. It did this a few more times before zooming off to the west. The Library of Congress does not have a record if Jefferson responded, but it's worth considering true or not. There are likely other letters from other people to other presidents during that long march to the 20th century. Letters likely describing other strange flying objects, and that slowly builds a narrative over time. One of the biggest legends around ufology and lost civilizations involves the so-called Moon-eyed people. They are said to be a race of small white people who saw poorly in the light and were driven from their lands by Native Americans. The Moon-eyed people are said, by some, to have been the builders of the thousands of earthen mounds that littered the American continent. But the story's own history is fraught with controversy and incredibly sensitive and deeply troubled parts of North America's own cultural identity. The systematic cultural extinction of people to clear land for new settlers using the unstoppable power of government. It's not fiction, it was government policy. It was right there in the name, the Indian Removal Act. And that allowed President Andrew Jackson to open up the Trail of Tears, clearing a path with the fiction of alleged white genocide. It was during President Jackson's second State of the Union address in 1830 that he planted the biggest beanstalk that still grows into modern ufology today, the Moon-eyed people. At that time, the U.S. government was clearing out the American heartland from Canada down to Mexico and towards the Pacific as quickly as possible. It was a government-sponsored human cattle drive under the banner of the Indian Removal Act, forcibly pushing Native Americans off their land and onto reservations to make way for European immigrants and wealthy land barons, who conveniently also helped pull the levers of power to get it done. So Jackson, using the State of the Union, justified the removal by claiming Native Americans first drove out the original white inhabitants who built the mounds across America and similar structures. Quote, "In the monuments and fortifications of an unknown people, we behold the memorials of a once powerful race, exterminated to make room for the existing savages." Well, that powerful race was widely interpreted as being white European moon-eyed ancestors, thereby justifying the removal to essentially give the land back to white people. That is just the bitter reality of history at this time. It is not about today's political lens. It's just how it was. While the Cherokee told stories of original inhabitants, it was the colonial scholars who wrote the books based on their interpretations. The idea these complex mound structures could be built by people regarded as subhuman by settlers of the New World, well, it needed a better backstory. So making the original mound builders white European ancestors fit into everybody's comfort zone. Except, of course, Native Americans. James Adair was an Irish writer who traded with the Cherokee and is believed to have been one of the first to mention the Moon-Eyed people around 1700, and he claimed they were the original inhabitants who couldn't see well in the day and were driven out by the Cherokee. But the idea that they were white Europeans came from blurring accounts of another explorer, a Welshman, who encountered a group of albinos when living amongst the Guna people in Panama during the 1670s. That's 350 years ago. He called them moon-eyed because they allegedly saw better at night. Tennessee Governor John Sevier allegedly said an elder Cherokee chief told him in 1782 that their ancestors pushed small, white early inhabitants off the land. Now, the governor was also in charge of negotiating and forcibly relocating the Cherokee onto new reservations. And by 1783, the next year, well, the Grand Chief who told him the story, he was dead, and the Cherokee relocation would soon be underway. But those colonial cultural seeds of interpreting the Cherokee stories as early white European settlers that predated Native American inhabitants, well, that seed was planted and it was growing. Modern ufology has lost the details of these historical accounts. But what mattered most in 1830 was driving out as many Native Americans from as much land as quickly as possible, and then clearing those mounds to remove the debate. One of the best things information crusaders like Graham Hancock have done is spark a debate. When you make a documentary on Netflix that challenges people to try and look at something differently, that's all, and the establishment lashes out with fury, well, you know you've hit a nerve. The question we need to ask is why? Why are these sorts of thought exercises so dangerous? Hancock has been one of the biggest champions of putting increased attention on mounds and other earthen structures around North America. Many are shaped like pyramids with no tops, but are astronomically aligned to the solstice and equinox, some going back tens of thousands of years possibly, even mirroring the layout of the pyramids of Giza. These plates, many made of copper, have been unearthed from mounds all over America. Some were found over 200 years ago, but their true history and origins remains unknown. Some even have the good luck symbol of a swastika, the image of hope and peace and spirituality by cultures all over the world. This was long before the Nazis stole the iconography. The swastika can be found in almost every ancient culture on Earth. So why are these images buried in the mounds, built by ancestors who arrived before Native Americans? And what is their connection to other cultures that use this same symbol, like Buddhists in places like Tibet and India? Which brings us back to President Jefferson in that first letter, because the oldest mound in America is now officially in Baton Rouge. New carbon dating results published in 2022 shows this mound is allegedly the oldest human-made structure in the Americas, dated to 11,000 years ago. Obviously, that could be a point of contention with some people looking at places like Pumapuku or the largest pyramid in the world, Cholula, Mexico, or what is buried beneath the Amazon or Guatemala's jungles. But putting all of that aside, From Canada's Bluefish Cave to the footprints immortalized in mud in White Sands, Arizona, said to be at least 23,000 years old. There is so much we do not understand about our history, while the apparent 11,000-year-old date for these mounds doesn't really account for how the sophisticated astronomically aligned structures were built by an emerging society coming out of a multi-thousand-year ice age without any pre-knowledge. Well, that's still a bit of a bridge too far to debate for many, but we'll get there. Because only after ripping apart the facts from fiction with a full, open look at things as they truly are, can we begin to assemble a much better portrait of our history and our past. From the Vatican to the Smithsonian, institutions of power driven by politics must be examined for what they are, not what we wish them to be, wherever those lines happen to be drawn. I'm Sean. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the content, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. I've got great new material coming all the time. If you want some more information, you'll find some helpful links in the description below. Stay tuned. Another great video is coming up next.